look around. For crying out loud, can we see that popcorn machine one more time?
You know, we here on the channel over the years have used WCW in the year 2000 as a constant source of material, but it blows my mind looking back at these classic shows I've reviewed just how few from this time period I've actually looked at in depth. Only about half of them all told. Well, I hope to rectify that, or at least start that, beginning this week, looking at what's billed as one of the biggest shows in WCW's history, and it's the last time we see this show under the WCW banner. It's time to work backward from my little block of 2001 shows I did a couple of years ago, going back one step further to Starrcade 2000 from December 17th at the MCI Center in Washington, D.C. This show was nominated by John Feuerhelm and Joey Williamson over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. And one thing I have to say at the top of this show is, my God, just how boring WCW is around this time. Oh my God, trying to watch the bill for this show, it was some of the dreariest, some of the dullest, some of the least interesting programming I'd ever seen. Now granted, the wrestlers themselves, I have no problem with them. For the most part, I think the wrestlers are doing the best with what they're given. But this is a dark, dark time in WCW right now. It's circling the drain. The sale to Fusion Media is practically imminent at this point, or the pending sale, what have you. And it just feels like it's a rudderless ship. And there's a lot of stuff about WCW at this time I'm actually kind of excited about, like Scott Steiner having become the new WCW champion. That was a long time coming, but now Steiner is in this program where he is like taking out all of his opposition one by one, and now you're left with this problem of, oh, there's like no one to actually challenge Scott Steiner that makes any lick of sense, and like over time you find out, oh, they're building toward what's going to be the big bang, the big reset later in the year when Fusion comes in and brings back all the people Scott Steiner has run out of WCW, and it's all going to come back, man. But we don't get that. And I understand the point of doing a build like that. It's very much reminiscent of like Starrcade 97, just multiplied several times for the number of people you are going to put away and then bring back. But you're doing that, but you're also putting a lot of pressure on the people who are still there, like Scott Steiner, who is running out of credible opponents. And then he's going against all these guys in the lower and mid card that no one would ever dream of beating Scott Steiner. That's all he's fighting on TV right now. And it just seems that it's not doing that reign justice. And you're also kind of showcasing just how shallow your talent pool is. So what else is going on in WCW around this time? Well, one of the big recurring storylines, if you want to call it that, is that fresh off the success of fighting Mancow several months ago, Jimmy Hart is now doing this big weekly call to action campaign to radio DJs and all the cities they're touring that, hey, he wants the radio DJs to fight him on Nitro, just like the Mancow thing. Hey baby, I'm doing these media appearances, might as well have a hook for it, ha ha ha. Also, the Harris twins like getting paid in sandwiches and not being on TV. The only t-shirts they ever advertise for are for the heels. CEO Ric Flair and Commissioner Mike Sanders butt heads, but Sanders is nowhere near Flair's league in terms of character. And like I mentioned, they're running out of star power at a rapid pace. In fact, the thing I'm most entertained by right now in WCW is whenever Crowbar does commentary, because he drops a bunch of Gordon Solie references.
Hello from the Sunshine State. You may have early on the Crimson Mask.
The hardcore champion has joined us, of course.
Can we get some wrestlers from the back?
Look out. He's from the...
It's definitely hard to be a WCW fan around this time, especially in comparison to what WWF is doing and around the same time period. They're still on that big hot streak. They're headed toward WrestleMania 17. But it is important to remember, the same month this show was happening at Starrcade, there was also Armageddon 2000. Not a great show. Just under 6,600 folks in the MCI Center, but it's a hot crowd though. 50,000 pay-per-view buys. It's tied for their second lowest amount all time. It would be matched by Greed just a few months later. .11 buy rate as well. Tony Schiavone, Scott Hudson, and Mark Madden are on the call. And the opening match is actually a doozy, folks. It's a ladder match featuring three of the top cruiserweight tag teams in the company right now as 3 count. That's Shane Helms and Shannon Moore battle Evan Karagias and Jamie Knoble, and the Young Dragons, Yang and Kaz Hayashi. It's a match for the #1 contendership for the Cruiserweight Championship. The match on paper is exciting, but it's a very confusing premise because it is supposed to be kind of an every man for themselves deal, but they are all in teams and there is like teamwork involved in this match. It's just, there's a couple of key points of logic just missing from this equation. The current Cruiserweight champion is Chavo Guerrero. He got sick and tired, damn sick and tired of the goody two-shoes actions of Misfits in Action and General Rection. The former Lieutenant Loco's gone out on his own and has immediately won the Cruiserweight Championship as a result. He shows up and joins commentary for this matchup. Nasty collision between Kaz and Shannon very early in the match. The guys all start fighting for ladders and climbing up to the contract, and my word, that thing's high up there. Nice ladder play between 3 Count and the Dragons. Shane goes face first into the ladder setup in the corner. Why are Courageous and Knoble fighting over the contract? I understood these rules to mean the goal is for the winning team to get it. Yang with a very ridiculous combo sends Shannon flying back into the ladder. Some very innovative ladder action in this match. Shane hits Yang from behind in the ring. Chavo on commentary is like, that's a good move, I'm going to steal that one. You're going to steal cheap shots? Lots of flips and dips from the inside of the ring to the out. Now we have a structure built in the ring. Courageous on the ladder bridge intercepts Kaz into a power slam, more following up with a big flying kick to the back of the head. Shane and Knoble are on the bridge. Big ass neckbreaker to Jamie, and I can't get over how little room for error there was for the horizontal ladder to come popping out from there. Knoble climbs up, but Leah Meow, the Dragon's valet, knocks him down, hits him with the riding crop until she's chased out of the ring. Chavo says, slap her and get her out of there. My word. Whole lot of ladders in the ring now. Mark Madden giving free publicity to Ace Hardware. The Dragons have now built a superstructure. Kaz with a slow-mo moonsault of sorts off the bridge onto the mat. Shannon Moore skins the cat on the ladder and head scissors Yang off. I loved that. Noble's knocked off. Helms and Moore are alone at the top. They decide to pull down the contract together, which I thought was the objective all along. I'm going to give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. Like I said, there was an issue for me in the logic of this matchup and how like teams worked and every man for themselves worked in this one. But besides that, holy crap, what an impressive highlight reel match this was. You know, I think it's just so funny to see, you know, what Edge and Christian and the Hardys and the Dudleys are doing in the WWF around this same time with their use of weapons. And how over in WCW, you've got this other group of guys who are kind of trying to do their own thing and make their own mark, doing their own form of innovation with the high spots and the ladders and stuff. I think it's so cool, especially when you consider that there are some mutual friends and there's some overlap there in circles, especially when it comes to like Shane Helms and Shannon Moore and the Hardys and all that stuff. And you know, I think it makes for a great time for that generation of wrestlers because it's just a time for innovation and showing, you know, the crazy stuff you can do with ladders. This would also lead to the big singles push that Shane Helms would get toward the end of WCW. He and Chavo would feud over the belt after this. Backstage, Hacksaw Jim Duggan is buffing his wood when Lance Storm talks to him about what happened this past week on Thunder, him teasing his defection back to America. He reminds him that the American fans will never take him back, but he'll always have a home in Team Canada. Elsewhere, Jeff Jarrett and the Harris brothers tell Commissioner Sanders that he wants a bunkhouse match against the Filthy Animals, but Sanders says it's already been billed as a Filthy Animals street fight, and Jarrett's just like, why don't we combine them? And Sanders says, okay. Elsewhere, we go to Kronik hanging out in a sauna. They find out their mysterious benefactor from the last couple of weeks won't pay them tonight until the job is done. The Bryans say it goes against their upfront policy, but tonight is so special, they'll make an exception. Now wrap it up, Crush.
Wow, my bait.
I'll be going out of a grudge match as Team Canada's Lance Storm takes on The Cat. Tensions have been brewing for weeks between these two. Storm was required to sing the national anthem on the Go Home Thunder after losing a match on Nitro. He was having a hard time with it, but then Jim Duggan's like, I'll sing it, tough guy. Like I said, there's this moment where he teases leaving Team Canada, but he loses the match mid-jersey removal. Duggan has become more of a liability to Storm, and they're building that friction up. Lance Storm with some political humor, telling Americans it took them 37 days to do what Canada only did in 1, which was verifying their federal election. Haha, boy, Lance, you haven't even seen the half of how crazy shit's gonna get. So they play the Canadian anthem in the nation's capital, then it's interrupted by the terrible network dub of the Cat's theme. The Cat runs in, he wants to do his dance, let's hit his music again. And of course the whole story in this match is where's Jim Duggan? We haven't seen him yet. We get a feeling out process at the start, we get some posturing with Ms. Jones and Major Guns, which gets the crowd all riled up. Which, by the way, I have to give him credit for the slight name change on there because Ms. Jones to me feels like it's very much inspired by Mrs. Jones from the Billy Paul song Me and Mrs. Jones. I love that song. Billy Paul, not quite James Brown, don't quite see the connection there, but that's kind of where my mind went with that. But I also like the fact that, it's Mrs. Jones in the song because it's implied that she's married, not to the person who's singing about her in that song. So they changed it to Ms. Jones because it's like, oh, Ernest the Cat Miller would never have an affair with someone else's wife. Storm is able to take advantage amidst the chaos. Cat comes back with a lift into Dick Kick City. The referee lets it go. Primetime Elix Skipper blatantly interferes. Referee also lets it go. Fighting on the outside, Ms. Jones goes to kick Lance, but she decks the referee instead. Guns with a dropkick to Ms. Jones, but she throws her back into the barricade. Then Tony can't stop talking about her hip.
Oh, and the hip. Look at that hip. The hip. I got lost in hip land there somewhere.
Storm has it won, but the referee is still down. Cat with his kicks. More back and forth. Suddenly, Jim Duggan showing up in neutral colors, looking conflicted, goes to hit Cat with a 2x4, but he drops it, thinks about it, hits him anyway, but with a lighter touch. Storm wins with the Canadian Maple Leaf. Then after the match, Storm and Skipper beat down Hacksaw. Cat ejects Team Canada from the ring. He puts on just one dancing shoe. There's a look he gives Duggan. Then they just kind of both go their separate ways. This one gets 2 stars out of 5 for me. Kind of a low ranking for a Lance Storm match, but looking at what he was given, man, this guy spent a long time feuding with the Cat in some form or fashion in the dying months of WCW. They fought over the commissionership at one point. Lance Storm was commissioner for like a week near the end of WCW, but nobody remembers that. Mike Awesome arrives to the building in an ambulance, getting ready for his match of the same name for later on. Meanwhile, Buff Bagwell, suddenly WCW's newest interviewer. He brings in the Filthy Animals, who look ridiculous even by 2000 standards. What is Rey Mysterio Jr. wearing here? They're asked about the new combination rules for their match. Konnan's not sweating it. Kidman does the raspberry thing he does in every promo now.
Billy, what do you think about these bunkhouse rules?
Well, I never bunked with a couple guys before.
Hey, Reno. You're more than welcome, brother.
I told you guys, back off, man. Say your deal.
Then elsewhere backstage, hardcore champion Crowbars with Daphne, who's not wearing the 70s gimmick anymore, much to his chagrin. She says he's gone soft, but he's like, whatever, I'm going to defend the title soon, I'm out of here. But then, I've embraced the lawless nature of the match and I'm starting it now. It's the hardcore championship match as Crowbar defends against a returning Terry Funk. Funk is back on TV for the first time in months, disguised as Santa Claus on the Go Home Nitro. Funk puts Crowbar on a crate, he pushes it around, and Bar just spins around, not hitting anything. They get into a big semi-truck. Crowbar, throwing Funk around, brings the damn ceiling down on him. He gets hip-tossed out of the truck, though, and through a table covered in cables. They fight using a damn car door. Terry takes it right on the head. Crowbar slamming Terry's head into a door once. That looks rough. Then Terry slams his head back into it multiple times. Looks super graphic. Oh, then there's the block that was used to keep the door from actually hitting him. God, that looked sloppy. The spot was excessive already. He should have been dead from that, but I would have at least tolerated a spot like that if you didn't, show the magic, immediately following that. Funk handcuffs Crowbar's hands together, and we get a recreation of Rock and Mankind at the 99 Rumble. Just multiple unguarded headshots with the chair, the car door, another chair. It is hard to watch at this point. A table is set up. Suddenly Funk starts going after Daphne. That allows Crowbar to fight back, puts Funker on the table, launching himself through it. Funk fights back. We get another dinger, a pile driver on the car door. Funk with the cover, the win. He's the hardcore champion once again. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. Like, this match, it was kind of hard to watch at some points with all those shots to the head, kind of an icky feeling at one point. But when they weren't doing that, some of the other stuff they did was fun and entertaining in its own right, and I had no problem with that. So just kind of take the good with the bad, I guess, with this one. But yeah, Funk regains the championship. These two will fight again the following month at Sin, but now the man called Ming is going to be thrown into the mix. That was the infamous match where we got Meng would win the title in that match, but then leave the company like a week later. Backstage, Mean Gene just letting Lance Storm have it about Jim Duggan earlier. Storm says Duggan's days in Team Canada have been numbered for about a month, because once an American, always an American, he says. Unless you change citizenship, I guess, right? Anyway, fuck Jim Duggan. Major Guns comes in, stumbles through the team catchphrase, then Gene tells her to get on his pole. My God.
Don't blame Canada, blame yourself.
Hey, listen, sweetheart, you stick around. I'll give you an opportunity to fly that Canadian flag on another pole. You get my drift?
Lex Luger getting his gear ready, narrating it all to himself like you do, gives away his entire plan to the mirror. Up next, Reno of the Natural Born Thrillers and Big Vito team up to take on Kronik. Who's paying Kronik to beat up these newly reunited brothers? And who the hell's paying to watch this match twice in less than a week? Like I said, Reno is a member of the Natural Born Thrillers. He and Vito have been at it for a while, but then the sister Marie shows up to try and bring the family back together. But at the start of the match, Brian Adams alleges it's Marie herself who's been paying Kronik to fight her brothers, which, okay, we'll see how that plays out. She very calmly denies it on camera, and there's lots of opportunities for like either one of those brothers to go up to her and be like, hey, that's not true, is it? Like, you know, they're messing with us, right? But there's nope, none of that from Vito, none of that from Reno, but Kronik goes up to her all the time and asks for the money. Quick, time for some lazy misogyny on commentary by Mark Madden.
Madden, you know women. Why is she doing it? Because she's a filthy tramp, but the bottom line is this.
It's a fairly basic match. It's a little double team on the outside by Kronik onto Vito as Marie continues to deny the allegations. The pectoral claws applied. That's an old school maneuver. Who do we believe? Shivani keeps shouting on commentary. As the match goes on, Mike Sanders and the rest of NBT come out to the stage. Big midair collision with Vito and Clark. Vito finally tags in Reno, who enters and immediately attacks Vito, hits the roll of the dice to the approval of his group. He goes to the cover even though they're on the same team. Kronik tells the ref to make the count, so he does. Reno wins and also loses. Reno throwing Kronik a bag full of cash. He was the money man all along. Okay. 1 star out of 5. The match was crap, and the story surrounding this was even worse. I've said it before. I hate these kind of storylines where it's like, oh, the mastermind was revealed, but he was also getting beat up during that time to like cover his tracks. Like, we've seen it in like storylines with as low stakes as this. We've seen it in as high up as storylines as like aces and eights and what have you. And it's just like, every time I see it, the logic is just not there for me. I'm like, it always just seems like they're just covering their ass at the end. Some bad booking and they're trying to correct from the previous weeks. So yeah, this one didn't do much for me. And you know, it was just one little side angle with the Natural Born Thrillers where it had nothing to do with them, but they were still kind of like floating on the outside. It was just not a very well done storyline to me. I didn't buy the chemistry between any of the parties involved, these supposed family members, and it just came off very, very artificial. And as far as Marie goes, there's no follow-up to her advancement after the year is over, because, you know, Nitro and Thunder is actually preempted for the last 2 weeks of the year, so by the time 2001 rolls around, Marie is gone. Backstage, Mean Gene congratulates the 2 members of 3 Count. Which one of them will face Chavo tomorrow night for the title? Shane Helms saying 3 Count won the match together, meaning they collectively are the top contenders. Chavo walks into the shot and big times the young grapplers, shows off his belt, then beats them up. Elsewhere, Buff Bagwell backstage with the US champ General Rection and the rest of MIA. Is this the beginning of the end of the MIAs, says Buff. Rection telling Shane Douglas that he's no stepping stone. He didn't fight for the belt for 5 months just for Shane to name drop Dominic DeNucci and beat him for it. He's very riled up at this point. But before that, it's time for the Whoa, Black Betty Ambulance match between Bam Bam Bigelow and Mike Awesome. Last month at Mayhem, Awesome was jumped by his opponent Bigelow backstage, wasn't able to wrestle. He comes back with a vengeance here. Awesome literally stripping himself of his 70s gimmick. The career killer is officially back, baby. Brawl makes its way to the outside very fast. Mike grabs a chair and smacks Bam Bam in the back. They fight their way toward the ambulance. Mark Madden with a very prophetic line moments before Bam Bam does some damage.
Who provides these ambulances anyway? Do they know what we get up to once they get here? I somehow... Oh!
Back in the ring now, and as this happens, I realize it's a very similar structure to the Hog Pen match I just watched from Season's Beatings with Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Henry Godwin, where it's like they wrestle, they go to the thing they're supposed to, they go back to the ring, they go back to the gimmick. I'll say this much, Henry O didn't bring out any tables. On the outside, Awesome with a big running start for an attack, but Bigelow backdrops him through that table. Bam Bam with a slam on the hood of the ambulance. Bigelow climbs up, he rips the lights off the top of the truck and gets on the roof. Awesome decks Bigelow, who goes teetering back through the roof and falls into the ambulance. Awesome wins. 3.5 stars out of 5 for me. That was just the match I needed to get me out of the doldrums from the last couple we had seen so far in this show. And it was very cool to see Mike Awesome like literally strip himself and shed that awful 70s gimmick and come back, you know, being something closer to his true self. It's just unfortunate he would turn heel again and join Team Canada like by the end of the week. Okerlund's backstage with the Natural Born Thriller Thrillers and Reno, what's the deal with you breaking up your family again? Reno says the Thrillers are his familia now. Gene pivots to the perfect event versus the Insiders, the tag belts. Chuck Palumbo doesn't say much before throwing to his partner Sean Stasiak, who has the absolute best talker out of anyone in this bit, barring Gene. He says they're going to retain the belts and go on to become the greatest tag champs in WCW history, but hey, you can't beat Rick Steiner and Judy Bagwell. U.S. Championship up next as General Rection, the new champion after spending months fighting Lance Storm for it, finally getting it back in Mayhem, defends against Shane Douglas. And things have gotten very personal between these two as of late. When Shane and Rection had a face-off in the ring, Torrie Wilson gets involved and Torrie's accidentally knocked out and sent out on a stretcher. The General with the early advantage inside the ring and out, Shane with multiple nut shots, but Hugh Rection toughs it out. Shane cannot stop playing dirty, tries even biting Rection in the nose, but it's still not enough. Rection goes up top for a moonsault, but Douglas trips him up and the champ goes crashing down. I guess that's finally enough to slow him down now because Shane finally has an advantage. It is short-lived though, as Rection drives Shane headfirst into the corner post. Rection goes for the moonsault once again, but gets none of it. Douglas grabbing the chain from his tights, a swing and a miss. Out comes Chavo Guerrero Jr., who yoinks the chain away. He distracts the referee, throws the chain to Shane. Referee sees Shane with it and just calls for the bell before he actually sees him do anything. Shane lays out both men with the chain having been screwed out of the match, then hits the franchiser on both. Hugh Morris is bleeding now. The rest of the Misfits run to the ring and make the save, and there's still this tension with Rection and Chavo. As a matter of fact, it looks like Lash LaRue or Corporal Cajun may be on Chavo's side here. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. Tell me again how Bill DeMott ended up being like the head trainer at what would become the Performance Center for so long after the WCW buyout, because this match to me felt like this should have gone through some more talk with agents or something. This was a weird, boring match with a finish that like does play into the feud between, you know, Hugh Morris and Chavo and all that, but it was executed so poorly because like, hey, 5 blatant nut shots in a row is okay, but like threatening someone with a chain, not even like seeing him hit him, is like an automatic disqualification. Like, okay. Mean Gene backstage with the world champ Scott Steiner and his top freak in Madeja. Both he and Sid are confined to their respective locker rooms until the main event because it's gotten so hostile. Scott says the key word tonight is beat. He says Sid made mistake when Sid took a title shot from Flair. He talks about having sex with his freaks and he's going to the Big O. That's our world champion. Hey everyone, Glacier's coming back. We're seeing the same old vignettes as before, but now they're adding the word again to the screen. Really quality stuff. The commentators are openly mocking this on TV, and this is going to lead to Glacier. He does come back. He's got one super fan in Norman Smiley, but Norman is just getting beat up all the time, and Glacier wants to help him, but he's so busy doing his shtick that he always lets Norman get beat up, and that's actually pretty funny. Buff Daddy backstage with the Insiders, Kevin Nash and Diamond Dallas Page. Buff helps them bury the Natural Born Thrillers. Kevin Nash puts on Buff's hat, does an old-timer tribute.
It reminds me, I broke in 61. I worked with Mulligan in Tampa. Had a hell of a deal there. Went to Lake City, sold it out. DDP says he and Kev are like fine wine, getting better with age. They've made careers out of defying the haters. They're both former world champions, and they're gonna beat the Natural Born Monkeys. His words, not mine. Up next, the filthy bunkhouse street fight with animals as Jeff Jarrett and the Harris brothers take on Konnan, Kidman, and Rey Mysterio Jr. The feud between Jarrett and the filthy animals has been going on for a while now. Like I mentioned, there was this bit where we learned that the Harris twins, A, don't like being on TV, and they like being paid in sandwiches. And so there's a bit of a running gag where that is kind of, they're kind of like this really cheap Kronik for whatever reason. They're not getting paid money, they just want food. And then like that goes back to bite them in the ass because like the next week, the filthy animals slip them some tainted sandwiches with laxatives in them, and you've got, you know, the Harris twins doubling over in discomfort, and they run out on Jarrett during their match and everything. Honestly, the one time I got anything remotely in the vicinity of a chuckle out of this angle was just the way the Harris twins sold it. And like, it was Ron or Don, who can ever tell, but the way he just kind of expressed his discomfort was in that really like real, genuine way. But like the timing of it, to me, just got this laugh out of me. It was very comedically timed.
Gentlemen, what do you think of this match?
If I move, something's gonna happen. Oh God, I move.
Jarrett's on stage with a microphone talking about how much stroke he has. He says he and the Harris twins will deliver Southern Justice tonight. Oh shit, are we getting a Godwin's run-in too? And folks, this match has got everything. There's plunder, there's a wheelbarrow, there's a popcorn machine, there's a bar in the ring, and the commentators say, that's not a real bar, Okerlund's not at it. What is a bunkhouse match? How is it any different from a street fight? They don't tell you. But Scott Hudson does coin the term Nashville World Order for the heels. It's actually pretty clever, and of course, it does not take off after this. It's a weapons fest as Tigress joins commentary. She's actually pretty good at that. Jarrett goes into the popcorn. The animals are doing their thing. Ray goes for the Bronco Buster hat trick, but takes the ultimate dick kick city before taking a face bump. Kidman and Mysterio put Double J through the bar, which crumbles like gingerbread. Kidman with that Arabian leg drop onto Ron or Don. Ray and Jarrett are fighting, and Jarrett with the powerbomb into the bin on the floor. Holy shit, that's got to be the most extreme thing Jarrett's ever done. Well, folks, I'm here to let you know the weapons portion of the match has ended, and now we're going back to basic ass tags. Ron or Don fails to remember the big rule that you don't powerbomb Kidman. Jarrett puts the sleeper on Kidman, and damn it, I'm just feeling hungry all of a sudden. Konnan gets tagged in, goes on a big run, but he's hit with the H-bomb. Another table is set up. Shivani with the call of the night, in my opinion.
Amazing that he doesn't have a broken neck, but he's got a broom! He's got a broom!
Does a springboard looking to hit Jarrett, but the twins intercept him and H-bomb him through the table. That's the coolest thing I've seen Ron or Don ever doing too. Kidman goes up top, but Don or Ron break a bottle over his head. Stroke time. I could have said that a little bit differently. The Nashville World Order wins. You know what? I give this match 4 stars out of 5. This is probably my favorite one of the night, in fact, because I had a big smile on my face the whole time. It was just a big, entertaining brawl. There were some chills and thrills there that I didn't expect and was pleasantly surprised to see. I really have no notes. This practically saved the show for me. Backstage, Biggity Buff is with Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, aka Dwayne Bruce, aka Braun the Leprechaun, the head trainer at the power plant. Buff speaking very reverently and respectfully about Sarge, asking his opinion on the Goldberg-Luger match coming up. Sarge does not say much before Lex Luger jumps him, Buff chasing Lex away and calling for help. Back at ringside, the guys are killing for time on commentary as the crew still keeps working to clean up the mess from the last match. Thank God there was no cake involved.
We've come a long way from Flair and Harley Race in 1983, haven't we?
Holy shit, you ain't kidding, Tony. We go now to a match for the World Tag Titles as the Perfect Event defend against the Insiders. Nash and DDP began teaming up, and you know, hey, their common thread was their friend Scott Hall, so they're called the Insiders now. It's very clever, and they make all these references to bringing Scott Hall back on WCW on the mic. Spoiler alert, he never comes back to WCW, but they do win the tag belts from the Natural Born Thrillers at Mayhem, but 1 week later they cry foul and say, hey, you pinned the wrong guy. So Commissioner Sanders strips the belts off of Nash and DDP, puts them back on Palumbo and Stasiak. One of the best parts of this build, in my opinion, is this one moment where, you know, a lot of the NBT guys, they go into the Insiders locker room after Paige leaves, they beat Nash down, presumably off camera, but they walk out, they see him, you see him like walking out of the room, and the camera guy follows them into the room to see Nash is laid out. But why is he holding a bottle of lotion? Everyone makes their entrances, and out comes CEO Ric Flair. He tells Sanders not to get near the ring or he's going to cancel the match and award the belts to the Insiders. Sanders responds by hanging out at ringside the entire time and Flair doing nothing about this. What the fuck? The match is underway. Palumbo's got a lot of footing issues here. Stasiak seems really bad at Irish whips for some reason. DDP looks to have things in hand until Palumbo, the illegal man, hits a super kick on him right in front of the referee. They say on commentary, they're clarifying that, oh, if Sanders gets 1 foot in the ring, then the match is over. No. Flair said he cannot take 1 step toward the ring. 1 step toward is very different than 1 foot in. And even when he gets on the apron, is that not a foot in the ring or something? Like, come on, guys. DDP, with many hope spots, finally makes the tag to a huge pop. Nash is on fire. Sanders hitting DDP in the dick. We get a double team by the champions. It almost puts Nash away. We get a diamond cutter to Stasiak on the floor. We totally miss. More Natural Born Thrillers run in. Paige fights them off. Shawn goes up top, but DDP crotches him. Nash with a jackknife on Palumbo. We get the cover, the win. The Insiders regain the tag titles. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars out of 5. The match itself I thought was like fine, all told, but really that whole stuff at the beginning of the match where Flair comes out and says, don't go near the ring or I'll disqualify the whole lot of you. And then that doesn't happen when Sanders is just hanging out by the ring. If Flair had never shown up at all, that would have made the match at least a bit more. It wouldn't have taken me out of it to see Sanders just there cheating and everything, and there's nothing happening, and the commentators then have to try and like scramble and just totally change the verbiage that Flair said in order to remotely justify why Sanders is still out there. And it makes Flair look like shit too, because he's out there, Sanders is doing all that stuff, and he does nothing. Michael Buffer is here for the proceedings now in a no disqualification match where anything goes as Goldberg defends his streak against the total package Lex Luger. Back at Mayhem, the two had a match. Goldberg won, but there was a referee bump involved. Luger tried using that as grounds to disqualify Goldberg, end the streak, get Goldberg out of WCW forever. But Flair says because the referee was pulled in the way he should not be disqualified, so we have this rematch here. Luger has been attacking Sergeant Buddy Lee to get into Goldberg's head since he was Goldberg's trainer, even made Goldberg have to face him in a match to continue the streak. A lot of mind games being played here by the total package. Shivani plugs Goldberg's appearance on the Man Show on this night. That was the Hanukkah skit.
You got a noon!
What's that mean?
Sleeper hole!
Goldberg attacks Luger before Buffer can even finish his intro, and the match is on. Goldberg just beating Luger's ass for a while as Shivani brings up Goldberg's charity work with Make-A-Wish he's been doing. That did remind me of a very interesting call that Scott Hudson made regarding his charity work on an episode of Nitro recently, but it sounds very different when you take it out of context.
He'll love 8-year-old kids all day long, but he'll kick ass all night!
On the outside, Luge shoves Berg into the ring post and takes over. Goldberg dodging some chair shots as Sarge shows up, Buff Bagwell following him, trying to keep him out of it. Luger tries to pull the ref in the way of a spear again. There's some chaos now. Luger using his brass knucks on Sarge, then on Goldberg, but we get a 2 count. Buff gets into the ring, hits the blockbuster on Bill Gold for no reason, but Luger throwing Buff out. What just happened? Luger goes to the rack, but Goldberg blocks it. The camera misses Bagwell attacking Sarge on the outside. Goldberg seeing none of this as he spears and jackhammers Luger to win the match and keep the streak alive. Bagwell now back in the ring and dinks Goldberg with a chair. He and Luger leave together. Why? Didn't Luger just throw him out? Oof, 1 star out of 5 for me, man. This match was not fun to watch. That seems to be a recurring problem that I have with a lot of latter era Lex Luger matches in WCW. Now, this would lead to the teaming of Totally Buff, even though there was a very confusing shit there where like Luger throws Buff out with their friends again. Whatever, that's in the past. They are now Totally Buff after this, which I do say in my 2001 pay-per-view reviews that it's actually a pretty entertaining team. It's very underrated. I do like cowardly, muscle heads who are also dumb. And I think that Buff and Lex really captured that spirit perfectly. But this match here was it was sloppy, and the finish was not very well conveyed, and it was just very confusing all around. Now it's time for the main event, folks. For the WCW Championship, Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner defends the belt against the man who never officially lost it in Sid Vicious. Scott won the belt at Mayhem, like I mentioned. He beat Booker T for it, and it was a very long time coming. People had been kind of wanting Scott to become world champion for a long time, especially since he broke out and did the Big Papa Pump thing. And so for him to finally get it here, a bit too little too late, but I think it's cool that they did finally recognize that near the end. And so he's put Sting and Booker T in the hospital already, and I mentioned he's kind of one by one he's getting rid of all these names and all these challengers and everything. All this time he's been warring with the CEO Ric Flair, of course stemming back from all Steiner's very incendiary comments towards Flair over the last couple of years. At one point Steiner even beats up Arn Anderson, who of course is retired due to injury, just to get at Flair, but Flair decides not to punish Scott, not to strip him of the belt, not to fire him or suspend him. He just wants to punish him and keep putting opponents in front of him, which is why he fights people like, I don't know, Sergeant AWOL and Ernest the Cat Miller and, Meng, when no one is like pushing Meng to the moon at this point. So anyway, Flair brings Sid Vicious back for the first time in months. We have not seen him since he was stripped of the belt in that big reset episode of Nitro in April. Never lost the belt. And so now Sid is going to be the new conquering hero to, to thwart Scott Steiner and topple him and bring the belt back to some previous glory. And of course, Sid at this point, most of his promos just end with him quoting his mama saying, "Mama says it bees that way sometimes." And when he's not doing that, he's spending a lot of time kind of looking like an idiot. At one point in the Go Home show on Thunder, he is like just spending most of the show not there because he's lost in traffic. He's calling it, I don't know this area very well. I was told to turn left at McDonald's or turn right at the Wendy's. I don't know where I am. It's like, this is the guy? This is the hero who's supposed to beat Scott Steiner? All right, I mean, he's got half the brain that you do, so keep that in mind. What the hell is this music they play under Michael Buffer's introduction? It's so cheesy.
The thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world.
Sid coming out wearing the long boys tonight. He's got the early advantage in this match. We get this test of strength of the two of them. On the outside, Medeja clocks Sid with a lead pipe while the referee looks the other way. Then Scott using a chair right in front of the referee, and nothing happens. What's the point of being sneaky if it's all just going to be the same either way? Steiner with the big belly-to-belly suplex gets the recliner locked in, but Sid grabs the ropes. He gets back into the hold a minute later. Medeja on the top rope for some reason. She goes for a dive, but she hits her man by mistake. A chokeslam by Sid, kick out by the champ. The Cobra clutch is locked in. Steiner palms the referee in the face. He flops down. Referee is out of position for a 3 count. Steiner with many lead pipe shots, but there's still a kick out. Jeff Jarrett shows up. He accidentally El Kabongs Scott. Sid almost wins. Jarrett pulls out the referee, which buys time for Scott to still kick out. Scott with a low blow. Dick kicks City. A T-bone, a recliner for the 3rd time. Sid passes out and Steiner wins and retains. The belt looks like it's falling apart, which is a pretty apt visual as we fade to black. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. They really threw everything they could to make Sid look strong in defeat, but almost to a ridiculous degree. And here's what pisses me off about Scott Steiner in this period of time where he's the world champion, where they can't make up his mind. Well, if he's a crazy guy, the inmate runs the asylum, he's insane, you don't know what's going to happen, he's a loose cannon. But ever since he won the belt, like, he has done like nothing to justify that at all. Like, oh yeah, he was a crazy man hitting people with lead pipe, he beat up the disco duck and all that stuff. And later in this feud, in this run for him as champion, we are going to see some pretty outrageous stuff with him showing off his violence as champion. But this does not do his character any favors here, I don't think. It was just too much gaga, and Steiner comes off to me as like a very empty vessel in this storyline here. You know, like Scott's going over, he's going over everybody. He's looking strong, but then like you're putting all this pressure on the company, on the rest of the locker room that aren't like the big names, the ones that, you know, keep getting written off due to injury. And like Nash and DDP aren't really ready right now because they're in the tag team scene and all that. So, you know, it's all this pressure on Scott to deliver as champion when the company is on its way into, you know, being gone and going out of business. And meanwhile, the rest of the roster, who has never been built up to be of the caliber of any of these other top names like Sting, Booker T, you know, Nash, DDP or whatever, they're being asked to fill those shoes and be the ones to challenge Scott. And it's just like, what are you doing here? And by the way, Steiner's entire feud with Ric Flair is going to get a whole lot weirder in a month at Sin, where after Sid breaks his leg in horrible fashion, Steiner ends up like joining Ric Flair's group. The Magnificent Seven is formed. If you want to hear all my thoughts about what happens with Mag Sev as the tail end of WCW transpires, I have those reviews of those last 3 shows. There's Sin, there's Super Brawl Revenge, and there's Greed. Those are all in the classic pay-per-view playlist, and the WCW pay-per-view playlist as well, if you want to hear my thoughts on that. But this was interesting to go back here and just see how we bridge that gap as we make our way to the last few months of WCW's existence. My final grade for the final Starrcade under the WCW banner is a C-. Talk about going out with a whimper, folks. Like, this was a show where I'm like, God bless the wrestlers. They're doing the best with what they are given. But everything they are given is so freaking boring. It's so illogical. Like, Vince Russo's nowhere near this at this point. You cannot blame this on him. There is just seems to be a lack of quality control and lack of communication between the people who are making these calls and these booking decisions and the producers who tell the wrestlers how to act it out. And just that miscommunication is just felt all throughout this thing, and it really makes it hard to watch. There are some fun gimmick matches on this show. I went into this with 0 expectations, but like the ambulance match, the Bunkhouse, Filthy Animal street fight, and the ladder match just blew me away compared to everything else going on in this mid-card. God bless those folks. But the rest of it is just not good in comparison to those like 3 shining beacons on the hill. And like I said, I mentioned this in my reviews of the 01 WCW shows. You can tell that there are some genuine efforts being made to course correct from a lot of the shitty practices of WCW in the past. But they're not there yet. They don't ever quite get there, but there's some slivers of hope you can see in this show. Well, that's going to do it for my look back at Starrcade 2000. What'd you think of that show? What'd you think of this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to Wrestling with Regret if you haven't yet. Hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Now, we are going to take a break from classic reviews until the new year. And of course, it'll be January. It's going to be Rumble season. So it's time to look back at a Royal Rumble pay-per-view that a lot of fans look back with some fondness. I'm talking about the 2002 edition. That's coming in 2024. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.